Hi, this is Bob Samuels, founder of TechConnectr. I have with me Charlie Tarzian, who is a very sharp data and particularly intent data marketer, and I look forward to sharing ideas with Charlie. So, Charlie, how are you today?
I'm great, Bob. Thanks so much. I'm really happy to be here with you. Haven't seen you in a little while because I haven't been to a conference in the last couple of months, but that's what happens when you get busy. Really looking forward to a great conversation, and hopefully this can contribute to a larger audience. And it's my view that we are at a point where the more we share and the more we collaborate, the quicker everybody can get to some form of success, which I think everybody wants. So it's always great to talk about, how we do things and what we believe and what makes us excited and what are the challenges and all that stuff. So it's great to be here.
Beautiful. Well, I share your sentiments. It's all about sharing wisdom and makes everybody smarter and better. So thank you for doing that. Can you give us a little bit of your background?
Yeah, so I've been in the data-driven marketing and sales space for a long time, longer than I'd like to think, but time flies. I started in the business in the late 80s and never looked back, and I came from the technical side. So I was the CTO, and back then really building databases out for the large multinational holding companies back in the day. People like Young and Rubicam before they became WPP, worked at Wonderman, actually rubbed elbows with some of the great direct marketing founders of all time, Stan Rapp and Lester Wonderman, so on and so forth. And from there, obviously, starting around 94, 95 is when the internet started to stick its head up and it began to blossom. I think we made our first major buy for Volvo in 1997, I think. And we never, I never look back. When I say we, I've run some substantially large agency networks around the world, all dedicated to data-driven marketing services types of things. And then about five and a half years ago, really started to build out a platform that would become a company called the Big Willow. And Big Willow is really focused on behavioral signals and what has now been adopted as intent data. And I think that we're at a point now where I think we're out of the first or second inning and are really making the case for why everybody needs to use it, but also really spend a lot of time with people teaching them how to use it. So it's really more of a, let's teach people how to fish and let's get some great success out here. And so that's in a nutshell basically what I've been doing, always data-driven, always interested in letting the data tell us where to go and what direction that we should take our clients.
That makes sense. So I'd like to know more about Big Willow and intent data. So I hear intent a lot. What is, and it means different things to different folks, I guess. So what is,
yeah.
How does that work? And there's different levels of intent, and I guess there's different degrees of confidence and impact.
I couldn't agree more. I think that there's a lot of hype, there always is, but I think having done this as long as I have, I believe that it's been oversimplified. The whole concept of intent is to understand how people in, and we're talking B2B, but how people in the B2B world make decisions and how do they research things on their way to a purchase? And are they doing that at all? In other words, there's a lot of false signals that you really want to understand as well, because you don't want to be giving data to a client organization that is not as specific and focused as anybody would like. So this oversimplification basically has been, hey, there's more people and more volume in the way that people are consuming content in this category. Therefore, there's a higher propensity to buy. And that gets you into a lot of trouble because that's way oversimplified. And so really what intent and behavioral data is supposed to do for you is to really understand what are the shared behaviors, what are the commonalities that companies have on their way through a buyer journey. What does a buyer journey actually look like, and so on and so forth. And to get there, you really need to understand client by client, account by account, how people who are eventually either going to buy or not behave on their way leading up to becoming a sales opportunity, going through all of the time frame that is required. You know, there are clients that sell infrastructure who have a timeline of 18 months. There are people who sell SaaS products and they have a timeline of 3 or 5 months, and so on and so forth. So every single company selling different things are going to have different timelines, and the people that are buying from them or that they like to buy from them have different behaviors. And it's really up to us to understand what that unifying structure in terms of the shared behavior looks like, so we could use things like machine learning in order for us to help clients lock down important moments where they need to intersect with accounts, where they need to be putting their content in front of them, and so on and so forth. So we're really at the place now where I think there's enough of us that have had enough experience to take clients to the next level as it relates to intent. But it's more than data. As a matter of fact, the data is useless unless you really bring questions to it. And that's where I get into the notion of intent performance and not intent data. Intent data is really not a good way to engage people who've never used it, or for people who have used it in the past that became frustrated because it was a little bit oversimplified.
Outstanding. So tell me more about intent performance versus intent data.
Well, you know this as much as anybody, that over the last 5 years, so much money has been poured into platform companies and point solutions, and everybody is really trying to solve the problem. So it's not that people are wrong to try to solve the problem. What we've done is we've created more problems along the way. And it all comes down to a seamless integration and a move away from certain assumptions that companies make on their way. No matter how good the data is, no matter how good leads are, no matter how good your stack is, unless you have a good foundation, everything is really going to fall apart. So it's really important to start with the basics and work your way up to a place where you feel like you are seeing the kind of result as it relates to every step of the way. And, you know, if you look at the funnel, right, the traditional sales funnel, a lot of people will tell you, yeah, I don't really have problems at the top of the funnel. I have plenty of people, plenty of inquiries, people on their way to being qualified. I've got, you know, so on and so forth. The amount of breakage in the marketing sales funnel really takes place in the middle of the funnel. Because if people actually get through to the end, it's up to sales to really close and make sure that the consideration and the information required to make a decision is all there. In the middle of the funnel, there's a lot of stuff that happens. And that's where a lot of our attention is in terms of helping clients really evaluate what goes on and what goes wrong in the case of a closed, lost opportunity versus when they actually win. And obviously, the losses are always larger than the wins, and that's just natural. It's trying to understand so that as you begin the process of performance-based intent, you're locking down and you're automating. So it goes back to this orchestration and this automation in incredibly important moments in time as a company evaluates you, as a company evaluates your competitors, and as they move through what is considered to be a buyer journey.
Okay, so the sources of your intent data, I assume that is from what people do on Aberdeen sites. Are you getting other?
No, not at all.
Other
not
points?
At all.
Okay.
No, not at all. We are processing 2 to 3 billion records per night and rolling that into a taxonomy. And the taxonomy are categories that represent the products, solutions, and services that our clients sell. So that said, Aberdeen site itself really doesn't have that anywhere close to that volume. We're looking at, right now, we monitor about 130,000 B2B websites around the world. So we have global coverage. And based on the category, we're looking at any number of tens of thousands of tech sites, tens of thousands of B2B finance sites, tens of thousands of sites in HR, in aviation, in manufacturing, and so on and so forth. And so that's where we get our signals. We're picking them up from the relationships we have with trade publications in the B2B world, as well as participating in and serving a lot of ads that allow us to see a lot of the activity leading up to making our decisions about whether we want to serve ads to these people.
So your source of intent data is more similar to Bombora than TechTarget?
I don't think it's either. I think both of those companies are we're all doing it very differently. In the case of TechTarget, TechTarget is a publisher and a very good one. And they probably have, and I'm guessing what they have, they might have 150, 200, and again, I'm not specifically sure, but they build their own websites and their structure. So they're categorizing, but they're living in a very specific TechTarget world. Bombora, I think on their website, says that they have 3,800 sites that they monitor. And so they have a specific relationship to publishers. And that's all really well and good, and we think that there's probably some good things that are going to happen. We're looking at it at a very different level. We're going out and looking at a more the totality of the web and not just a small slice of it. I think TechTarget is, you know, from a volume perspective, very small compared to what we see. Bombora is even smaller than I think what we see. Now, is anything better than the other? It really depends on how you bring data science to that picture. I would rather have lots of volume the way we have it than be very restricted, because you can't control where people go. And I think that there's a demographic issue as you get younger people in, you know, let's say the 25 to 40 category. They're not necessarily going to conventional or traditional publishers at all. So you want to look for blogs. You want to look for the peer-to-peer communities. You want to look for the alternatives that are quality, but are not the traditional forms of publishing.
Interesting. So, and there's other companies out there like 6 Sense and Mintigo and Everstring and so forth, where they help companies with lookalikes and so forth. Do you get into that?
Well, lookalikes, of course, and you have to, and that's the problem with account-based marketing, right? Is that in account-based marketing, you know, no more than 6 to 10% of your targeted account list is going to be in market at any time. So you need to find a way to maximize the effort of your marketing and sales, because if 90% of your marketplace that you've selected is really dormant, you have to find lookalikes. And that's what the real-time marketplace does for you. Intent is supposed to deliver to you a targeted account list of both your targets and lookalikes, so that you're optimizing and you're selecting, so that the prioritization is is allowing you to make really good choices in terms of how to act around those things. If you only use your targeted account list and you don't look at lookalikes, you're making a terrible mistake, because you would widen out your total addressable market incredibly. And that also means, well, when you say lookalike, it's an exact lookalike of the types of companies, the number of employees, the revenue that the companies that you've already selected, you know, in your targeted account list. Here's the problem. I've been doing this for a while, and there's not a lot of people I've met that have scientifically grown a targeted account list. So there's been nobody that will reject lookalikes as long as they're in the sweet spot of what they're looking for.
Right. So do your clients combine your data with their internal data?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a lot of reasons and a lot of different use cases for that. We have a Salesforce app. We deliver data through into marketing automation. So those are really good examples of pushing the data and automating and creating these plays, and the whole notion of orchestration. On the other hand, you want to understand how everything works together. And so we present data in a comprehensive way for clients. We actually put pixels on our client site, and that gives us that 360-degree view to say, while these 3 people came to your site over the last 2 weeks, this is what they were doing, and this was the content conversation that they and their colleagues were having to give more insight into what's going on. So absolutely.
So you end up with third-party and first-party data that you're managing.
Yeah, which is known as second-party data, but yeah, we combine both. That helps us with prioritization and scoring. It also helps us with understanding and integrating into the daily life of people who count on that as the bloodstream of marketing and sales inside their company. Bob, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not hearing you.
Now. So Charlie, do you have any examples you can share as far as clients doing really cool things?
Yeah, I mean, there's very different use cases. So I can tell you that we have a client that's on record as saying that they're getting a 40x return on their investment in terms of using our approach.
Wow.
But that's a very sophisticated client, and they have worked really hard to integrate everything that we do together so that there's nothing left on the table, for example.
Wow.
There's a client that has included us on a global basis where they were using some of the other companies that you were naming previously, and they see our data and our approach as being complementary and in some cases superior to those other companies, because I think we see ourselves as data science as a service. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think a lot of these companies are delivering data. So while the data is absolutely critical, we're alongside our clients as an outsourced data science group, really helping them see the forest through the trees. And I think that's a big difference. So we had a big win where we are now global with a client that already has other intent vendors, and that was totally convinced themselves that ours was really, they really saw us as unique and differentiated. So that's another one. We have another client that, and this is a really good one, really large hardware company that gave us a metric of $75 for what they call a high value engagement on their site using our intent qualified or intent targeted advertising. And we're now down to $8. So the agencies that drive these programs are given a number of $75. After 5 months, we've got it down to $8. So those are really 3 different use cases where we're totally integrated. We've become integrated into the data science data lake on a global basis at a Fortune 50 company. And then this other very large hardware company is the other one where we've had this significant performance in terms of using intent to drive targeted advertising and get the numbers down for them by 81%.
Wow. So it sounds like you pointed out, I think the difference between intent data and intent performance. I think it's not just providing the data, but providing the intelligence of next steps and what to do with that data and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think again the most important thing I think to tell the audience, and much of the audience probably knows this already, is that this requires a commitment and a process. It's not just going to fall out of a box. I always tell people, you have Excel, but you don't expect Excel to fall out of the box and run your company. It's the same thing here. We need to do the right set up, the right work, the expectations and assumptions and all that stuff in order for this to grow organically, because then your marketing and salespeople begin to understand the differences and they see the differences. But it really takes a commitment. You can't just have a platform and log into it and expect miracles to happen. And I think that's where a lot of people get very disappointed, is that we need to do a better job of explaining how to do this, why it's important, and then be all over the performance, the metrics.
Yeah, no, that's well said. That's really well said. So, so you've been around a long time, and so you've seen a lot of changes. What do you see coming up? What are we going to be talking about next year? What are we going to be talking about 5 years from now when we talk about AB, when we talk about intent data? What will that look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because in 1996, you probably remember Regis McKenna wrote that seminal book called Real-Time Marketing. Mm-hmm. And I think we've been chasing that for the last 30 years, or it seems not 30, but 25 years, where, the technology has certainly caught up to what we want to do. In other words, I don't think any of these companies that exist, and they're all doing, varying levels of success, they couldn't be possible if we were not introduced to the cloud, right? And what Amazon and Microsoft and others have done is made this approach affordable, so that we can take a run at all of this data, understand it, and then be able to come out the other end with the recommendations that need to be automated, right? So I think what's going to happen is there's, I don't know, in the next 2 or 3 years, first of all, I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation. And I look, let's put it this way. There's two good news things for everybody, right? Which is, if anyone had figured this out, we would have known already. And you look at people like Salesforce, who are constantly pushing the envelope and constantly buying companies and constantly trying to figure it all out. I could tell you honestly, they haven't figured it out yet. It's not for lack of trying, and you have to give them a lot of credit, because they don't just sit around. They're making incredible bets and putting resources in trying to figure things out. So that's one thing. The second thing is, this is really about humans and understanding human behavior, right? And not necessarily artificial intelligence, and it's going to eliminate everybody's jobs. I think the disappointment out here in the community of marketing operations, sales leaders, sales operations, is that a lot of people expected to go to jobs and do some incredible strategic work, and everybody's wound up in the weeds, so somebody like Scott Brinker, who's wonderful and is really one of the leading, the leading people who are driving and articulating a lot of stuff, is really it's funny, because I remember seeing him in the lobby of one of his shows, and he was giving out the poster with 6,500 nameplates on it. And I told him, I said, I don't think that's very helpful. That I don't think that's really kind of what we're hoping to achieve, which is just the massiveness of these point solutions and the confusion in the marketplace about what I really need. More to the point, I think we need to back off and recognize that all the platforms are out there, a lot of commodity stuff, a lot of things are on par with each other. It's the thinking and the strategy that's missing. And, what I've said, and jokingly, of course, because I do respect everyone, but I say that when I go to these shows, and you and I see each other all the time, I look around and say, there's a lot of electricians and a lot of plumbers, but where are the architects, right? So a lot of people are trying to sell point solutions, but how do you architect it and pull it all together? And so, but at the end of the day, getting performance out of it. It's one thing to basically say, when I flip a switch, I get electricity, and when I turn the tap, I get water. That can't be enough. Right? Those are table stakes. It has to be, this is where we get success. This is where we get more for less in terms of our spend, in terms of our resources, in terms of, all of that stuff. And it's all right in front of us. But we have to take the time to understand the implications, how it changes your organization, and the kind of people you need to interpret the tea leaves. So, to be direct, I think in the next 2 to 3 years, a lot is going to happen in terms of more automation, more discovery of behavior using behavioral data. And then I think in 5 or 6 years, we're going to, I think we've already reached peak insourcing, meaning I think that we're going to see a lot more outsourcing in the next 3 to 5 years, meaning that when I say peak insourcing, it's everybody has their own Marketo instance, and everybody has their own Eloquent instance, and everybody has their own Salesforce, and yada, yada, yada. And I just don't think there are enough people that are driving strategy to get the result that everybody wants. I think there's a disappointment out here that no matter how much you train people, no matter how many people you throw at it, you still fall short of performance because it's at the strategic level that that's going to happen and what you feed the stack. So, you know, I would say taking the words from, I think it was John F. Kennedy, where, you know, ask not your stack to think, ask your stack to do. And I think that there's still a lot of work to be done on the thinking side. I think the doing side, you know, everybody will stand up and say, hey, and there's some really, really bright people out here that are really just, you know, trying to get their, you know, I use these metaphors, but just trying to iron their shirts, right? Just trying to wake up in the morning and get through the day and make sure everything passes through this monstrous stack. But at the end of the day, we need to take a lot more time to look at what the result is and what we need to do you know, a better result. And, you know, even simple stuff, Bob, like, did it ever occur to anybody that PPC is really not very good for B2B, right? Why did I say that? This is just an example. And by the way, I'm not in the PPC business, so I'm not selling anything. We don't do that. But what I'm saying to clients is, you know, your effective PPC and what you're spending is a lot more than you think, because a lot of people who are clicking on your ads, you can't resolve them to an account. You don't know where they're coming from. They're ghosts in the machine, but you're paying for them. So if 70, 80% of the people clicking on your PPC ads are not coming from resolvable IPs to an account that you want to do business with, then your effective PPC goes up 7 or 8 times, right? So all of a sudden, are you really spending your money wisely? And the answer is, well, not really. Just like you've got some of these people who think they're in the intent business and they're saying, you know, you're going to pay me X amount of dollars. And when I tell clients that, you know, these review sites that are saying they're in the intent business, and I say to clients, but your filter for a client you want to go after is $750 million in revenue or more, and they're only sending you 10 or 12 of those a month, but you're paying them $4,000 a month. So you're spending $400 per account to tell you that 2 or 3 people came from that account, and that's all they're going to tell you. I said, is it really worth that? I mean, for $400, don't you want an appointment? So I think there's a lot of that goes on that I think people really need to look at, because at the end of the day, we're really, and I think everybody in this business really wants the clients to succeed. And who doesn't? We love to build things and we love to be right about things, but we want these great clients that we work for to succeed. And I just think there's not enough. Everybody's running around with their hair on fire, and I don't think there's enough time given to really think about the larger piece. So 5 years from now, hopefully we will have bedded down a lot of the things that could be automated that are allowing clients to come in on a Monday and look at the past week in the rearview mirror and be satisfied with what they see. Because right now, I don't think there's a lot of that.
Right. Good stuff, Charlie. Thank you. By the way, I'm going to be interviewing Scott Brigger this afternoon.
Oh, well, Scott is brilliant. And, you know, he's just one of the people that just does, you know, he's like the what do you call it? The bunny, the battery bunny, whatever it is, Energizer bunny. I mean, he's helped articulate this world. He really thinks hard about it. I think what he does is he thinks a lot about the technical and technological repercussions of it, and I love that. But we need to have an equivalent that's really looking at, are we performing the way that all this technology put together should be performing? I think that's the big question.
Yeah, well said. Beautiful, Charlie. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for your sharing your wisdom.
Well, thank you. I first of all, I'm flattered that you think it's wisdom. It's my experience. I don't know I'm old enough yet to have wisdom, but because you know, I think I make the same mistake twice a couple times. But anyway, I love the opportunity to first of all, can't wait to see you again. And you know, if you want to talk to some clients, let's go offline and I'll make some introductions to you because they'll have points of view outside of us that you want to hear as well.
Yeah, I think that'll be very enlightening. It's a pleasure, Charlie. Thanks again.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. Take care.